time without the compromise of key values, which in Western settings are increasingly marketed as ethical, because you would see these three characteristics identified would typically meet most ethical financial profiles. And from a Muslim perspective, they're Islamic. And it's very important that we are proud of these structures. We see the value that they can bring. And I would personally say that we are increasingly active in promoting the role of zakat, of waqf, of sukuk, of these, what we see as wonderful vehicles of Islamic social finance to make the world a better place. For those of you that know London in the UK, or have seen some of the wonderful images of central London, one thing you may or may not know is much of the development in recent years that has been done in London has actually been done through Islamic finance. And because of the way that London planning laws are, typically there will be a charitable component as well. So we even see, even when it comes to direct investing, even in non-Muslim countries. So you'll be aware, nearly 10 years ago, we had the Olympics in the UK. The whole Olympic village was funded through Islamic finance. For those of you that would have seen the Shard, the tallest building in Europe, which stands in the city of London, again, this was funded through Islamic finance. So, but we're finding that increasingly we're not confident in promoting our value and what we're able to add to the world. If we can move on to the next slide, which is to reflect on how we need to consider ISF in the context of current challenges. So today, we see that there are a number of major challenges that is making the world increasingly polarized, where the poor are becoming poorer and the rich are becoming richer. So there's three key areas where at NZFW, we feel Islamic social finance has real value to add. Number one is excessive increases in untaxed wealth. So there's a number of stories. There's a really interesting report in Business Insider, which identifies how billionaires made another 637 billion in the first 90 days of coronavirus. Now, bearing in mind how 99% of the world, or 99.8% probably of the world, or 9%, with providing food, struggled with getting basic health care. This is actually a shocking circumstance. So we see one of the problems we have is a massive increase in untaxed wealth, where the rich get richer and they increasingly pay less on their wealth, especially in Western countries. We would have seen last week the story of Donald Trump, for example, paying $750 income tax 1 year and actually paying no income tax for 10 of the last 15 years. And yet he is a supposed billionaire. So we can see that this is something that is, increasingly going in Western markets, but it's something of an opportunity for talking about zakat, talking about the fact that, you may have a number of, let's say, wider social welfare systems in the UK. In fact, take the UK, for example, which would tax wealth at between 10, 20, and 30 and 40%, depending on your income bracket. But what we find in Western countries is the more you earn, the less you pay, because you are able to find lawyers that help you escape those taxes. However, a genuine wealth tax like zakat represents gives an opportunity to really challenge some of that, be it at 2.5%, but it's better to have 2.5% of a billion than to have 20% of 100. So this is something that we see as a current challenge, but also a phenomenal opportunity for zakat agencies to speak about zakat, to speak about zakat as a wealth tax and its ability to empower its local communities. Number two is vast deregulation of employment laws. Number two is legal exploitation of labour. And the legal exploitation of that we see globally. And this is not something where we would say this is not something where in the past that was confined to the slave trade, but actually we have modern slavery now, which is just as strong in Western countries as it is in Eastern countries, but it has a different style. So, for example, maybe in the past you would have seen in parts of Africa there would have been exploitation from colonial powers in extracting sovereign African nations' wealth and its people into Western countries. Now it's done in a different way, where people are allowed to stay in their countries, but they're exploited through forced labor, like we've seen in China, like we see in so many countries where people are forced to work at zero pay, or at $1 a day, for example, or even in the UK, for example, where in Ramadan this year, there was a very big story of how one of the largest fashion brands here was identified of paying its staff £3 an hour, £3 an hour. And bearing in mind the legal minimum here is about £9. So this again was being identified to be around modern slavery. Now, what that represents for us is actually an opportunity for Waqf. And why I say that is that when we have strong Waqf institutions, they're able to provide unrestricted finance towards lobbying for people like this. Waqf has, if you look throughout history, served Islamic civilizations very well in places like Spain and Turkey, where you saw strong community institutions emerge through Waqf being able to provide unrestricted finance for civil society. And finally, in this area, COVID itself has created much uncertainty the world over. Now, we feel that this is a wonderful opportunity to bring together people of different backgrounds to work together for solutions. So one of the things that we often struggle with is this idea of clash of civilizations, this idea of how Muslim minorities struggle in mainstream, but also in Muslim majority nations where people of faith are increasingly at odds with people that are from the masses that are increasingly agnostic. So we find that something like Islamic social finance helps to build bridges because it allows wealth to move between those that have to those that do not. And if you can attribute this movement to Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam, and the sunnah that we have in so many social finance vehicles, be it waqf, be it about paying zakat, etc., then these are great finance vehicles, be it waqf, be it about paying zakat, etc., then these are great opportunities. So I wish to finish with our final slide before I take questions, which is what we call the accelerate model. And as you can see, the idea of accelerate is that there are ways to accelerate the impact aid can have. So accelerate is a model that we've been developing at NZF worldwide, which looks at three key things for any financial intervention, which is empowerment, emancipation, and enhancement. So we believe an accelerate model can be deployed in any circumstance. And it works like this. Number one, it's there to empower. So any social finance that is deployed has to be led on an investment-led approach. So it's equity over debt. And this is very important. Unfortunately, globally, we have seen that charitable funds, as they move from wealthier nations to less wealthier nations, unfortunately, they create a cerebral poverty and poverty of the mind as well, which means that there's a consistent dependency on remittances. This ranges from different extremes globally, but we are currently working on a project in Somalia, for example, and 24% of Somalia's GDP is remittance, which is a phenomenal amount of money coming in from diaspora globally. So what we want to see is an empowerment-led approach, and that means that whenever you're looking at finance and financial deployment, you choose equity over debt. You choose, equity over charity, and this is to build partnerships, and this is to ensure that we see genuine delivery emerging. Number two is what we call emancipate, and this is very important because we believe that where Islam can bring value, it can bring it through the idea of financial emancipation. So instead of bringing people to a situation where they are dealing with compound interest, where you look at, for example, the major financial institutions of the world that provide quote-unquote bailout loans, etc. What they essentially do is they leave people stuck in debt for not just for years, but for generations. And I'm sure, unfortunately, what will be for centuries. So we believe that the philosophy of any financial intervention should be looking at how to improve liquidity through financial instruments. So really looking at genuinely building new wealth within communities. And for example, we believe that Waqf and Sukuk have a wonderful opportunity in these places. Number one, because they have consistently delivered in the Islamic civilization in the past. And number two, that now with the arrival of technology, they are much easier deployed. And that brings me to my last point, which is to enhance. That all things that are currently being done from a social finance perspective, we need to enhance the quality of their intervention through embracing technology. There are so many technological tools now which allow you to deliver value. Let's say even 10 years ago, to launch, for example, a new charitable fund to raise money would have been a very traditional process. You go, you speak to the authorities, you register a charity, you then start trying to approach a bank, and then you start designing a fundraising campaign. You print leaflets, you print posters, you go into your community, you have tins for collecting cash. But the reality is, right now, for example, I'm in the UK. I just prayed my Fajr. It's just about to turn 6 a.m. If after this call I decided I wanted to do some fundraising to support this conference, for example, and make a contribution towards a COVID response to our esteemed speakers' number of initiatives that were mentioned in the previous session in Nigeria, I could do that within 10 minutes, or maybe even less, within 5 minutes. All I need is my email address and my bank details, and I could go on to GoFundMe, for example, create a campaign, and boom, we would be live within 5 minutes. So we need to look at how we can use technology to enhance our traditional tools and improve access to our communities. And I think Africa has some great lessons to learn here. I've seen wonderful examples of real digitization of mobile-based financial transactions in East Africa. And I think there's some phenomenal learning to be taken from places like Somalia, for example, which would traditionally be seen as places where, we should just be, sending remittances and donating charity. But we should be looking at some really great learning there from how mobile payments can be used, how you can empower local people with cash through digital payments. So we need to look at how we can enhance what we're doing through embracing technology, through using AI, through using machine learning. So, and I'll finish with this point. One of the things that we're exploring in the UK, for example, where we have a domestic zakat fund, where we have thousands of applicants applying for zakat now, especially through COVID, is how we can introduce AI and machine learning to run through their application. So before somebody's zakat application arrives at a zakat worker, a social worker, to judge their application, we have processed maybe 20,000 applications or 15,000 applications over the last 10 years. If through AI, we could be scanning those and looking at what the value of this application is and what it should be awarded just through data, then we should be embracing that. So we've just set up a project to try and look at that and explore, as we build a new CRM, how we can embrace big data, embrace machine learning, and really start delivering enhanced value from our existing system. So this was what I wanted to speak about today. I don't know how the process works, if there's an opportunity for questions. And I just wanted to finish with say I appreciate the time and opportunity by the organizers and always the leadership that we've seen from Baznas and the whole team that's engaged with putting these wonderful opportunities together. So thank you very much for your time and your patience.